Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Mike Armstrong podcast show. And this evening or afternoon stateside, we're joined by Dr. Caxton, who is a doctor based out of Dallas area in Texas. So how are you doing today, Dr. Caxton? You okay?
Great, Mike. Thanks for inviting me to your show.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks for coming on. Now, yeah, we met on Clubhouse, and I've got to know you quite a bit, and I know you specialize in talking about and discussing the COVID vaccine and the COVID situation, as well as divorce and how that impacts health, etc. So, tell us a little bit about the background to that. Really, tell us how you come about becoming a doctor. Obviously, I guess the divorce work become first and analysing, that. But tell us a bit about that, and then tell us how you ended up becoming a bit of a vocal point for COVID as well. So just give us a bit of your story, really, Dr. Caxton.
Sure. So I'm originally from Nigeria. I was born in England, actually,
Okay.
and we grew up in Nigeria, where I went to med school. And when we left England to go to Nigeria, we had a doctor's kit, that my mom bought along with the stuff that we packed back to Nigeria. So I was doing physical exams for those little girls and boys in front of the house at the age of 4. So it was just there. And I remember that little white box with a fake stethoscope and fake needle and, fake first aid kits, so to say. So there, I think that was where the love of medicine was instilled. At the age of 13, my mother died in a really bad motor accident.
Oh,
And I remember kneeling down by her casket. Um, I have a very strange kind of memory where things that happened when I was 1 year old. I have an exact memory of them. At 2 years old, there was actually a day my dad was swimming in England in one of the swimming pools there. And I remember his friend saw me walking towards the pool. I was 2 years old. And someone said that was impossible. I said, well, maybe I don't know how it's possible. But I remember getting in the water, and I remember not being picked up, but someone wrapping me in a towel. And I said, I remember that same friend of my father, they became friends. I think another man saved me when I got in the water. I remember him coming into the house with my mom and dad later in the evening to come and visit them to say how I was doing. And I said, we call it a cot with a little crib where they put the kids. My cot was behind the door. And my parents were students in UK then, in London. So I said, I remember the man's voice, and I saw him when he walked into the room to come and say hi to them. And I was inside the cot. And someone said, how's that possible? I said, I don't know. I don't know what's possible. What is it? So, but I just remember that occasion.
It's just a memory, isn't it?
It's a strange thing. And they said, I asked my dad, and he was absolutely correct later on. Then at that moment, as I knelt down beside my mom's casket, I looked at it and I said, you know what? If there was a good ER, and think back, this is Nigeria. There's no good ER. I mean, back then, there was a good hospital system, but it was only fair. But in a precautious way, I made up my mind. I said, if there was a good emergency room here, my mother would not have died. And I'm going to do everything in my power to save every life I can. And that's how I started the journey. I'm an internist. I'm a board certified internist. I've been a physician for over 31 plus years, and I've done a lot of clinical research. And that's how I came about how divorce affects health. Yeah. So fast forward, I went through a lot and getting medical school and coming out, but here in the US. So in 1993, I got married to a woman, and not knowing what I was getting into. I thought I did because we had premarital counseling, I was mature. She looked like she was very mature. And that I didn't realize was there was a game going on. In my cultural limitation, I didn't understand that there was a scam going on with this lady to pull on me. So 1 hour, can you imagine this? 1 hour after we got married, we still had, and you hear this, that on a woman's wedding day, when she's still in a wedding gown, she got married, those are the happiest moments she's having. So here we are, supposedly with a woman who got married, who's supposed to be in her happiest moments, We drove over from San Jose, California to San Jose, Sunnyvale. Sunnyvale back then is now Silicon Valley, but at that time it had lush, beautiful gardens. And the goal was we will go there once we're done before we go on a honeymoon to that little lush garden city and take some beautiful pictures. So as we got to Sunnyvale, I pulled out in the car. We still had gifts in the trunk, and it doesn't even make any sense when I share that story over and over. So I went over to the driver's, to the passenger side in the car, opened the door, and that was my first surprise. This woman in a gown, it was as if she was on a springboard, jumped out of the car at me, screaming like some possessed person, "You're stuck with me." And I froze, like, oh my God. 1 hour after the wedding, what did I get myself into? Say, "Hey, look, you're stuck with me." And I said, oh my goodness. I almost peed on myself because I'm saying I was in total shock.
Yeah.
But fast forward, 8 months later, I started having chest pain. By the way, the marriage was so bad. It's like I had to ask her, wait a minute, the very next day, what are you? She said, yeah, I trapped you. You're stuck with me now. And I'm saying, oh my, what? So that went on, and I thought, maybe this woman, I love her, you can fall in love with anything. If it's not right for you, if they know that this is not, they're just setting you up. And I'm a doctor, right? So, it's like, hey, I'm going to trap this doctor. He's stuck here, can't go anywhere. And when I started having chest pain, and Mike, this is 28 years later. And if you see me running, you'll say, what? Who's that guy? Can't be. So I was quite athletic even back then. How could I be driving home? And I was just driving home from work. I was doing AIDS research then. And I wasn't even in a panic state.
No.
And I started having chest pain. And I said, oh my God. So, fast forward 3 months later, in December, I had the same episode of chest pain. That's when I said, man, if I stay here, it looks like I might just drop dead of a heart attack one day. And people will say, whatever happened to that guy, Caxton? I thought he had some great plans. So I said, you know what? I'd rather walk away than die inside this marriage. So it was 14 months of hell. That's where the research began. So in 1994, beginning January 1st or way before then, I was reading some stuff in 1993, and then I came across an article that said divorced people were twice more likely to die. It was an article by a lady called Noreen Goldman and another guy who in Princeton University. And they looked at 16 or 18 different countries around the world: Taiwan, West Germany, England, Canada, USA, Japan, 15 and 18, sorry. Because I always say 15, 16, because when I was trying to do my first PowerPoint set of slides at that time, it won't fit in. I was trying to put in not enough countries so people can see that divorced people were twice more likely to die than married people. So from that study, I came across the reality that divorce kills people, and there are twice more dead people than married people. And I coined this phrase, dead people don't lie, when it comes to divorce. So, and from there and my pain began the search for what could I have done wrong to have ended up with this kind of woman? But life throws stuff at you that you don't question. You just try to figure it out. I have a religious background, but I wasn't blaming God. I was just saying, you know what? Maybe God even had a plan with this nonsense, that it just blinded my eyes, because I'm very skilled in relationships in general. So I don't see how I could be blinded not to have seen this. But culturally speaking, it was impossible. Yeah. So fast forward, I started writing books. And so far I've written 18 books, some of them about the majority of them on relationships. I wrote How Divorce Kills. I wrote 36 Well-Kept Secrets, 25 Things Pastors Must Like About Divorce. It's not learn, instruct, and, keep at the back of their minds and educate their people about, not that they should like it, but it's an acronym for the pastors to know that a divorce can happen to anybody. And you see in the church. So not only that, I've written some other books on medicine, and 3 of them on COVID in the last 1 year. So let me share, since you asked that question, let me share some of the things that happened with COVID with you. I'm an ear doctor, and I work in hospital medicine, and I do critical care. If you notice, I don't work in the clinics. I had my own clinic when I lived in Louisiana, but I mainly do really sick patients. That's what I enjoy doing. And you can see where that basis will have come from, right? That same childhood story, that the sickest patients are my joy to take care of with all passion. And I'm passionate about caring for those patients. So in January, when that leak from that ophthalmologist in China came through to the rest of the world, I said, wow, okay. So, and I thought everybody in America, was interested in curtailing the disease. And that includes the CDC, the FDA, and the NIH, and the overall governing health bodies in the US. I thought they were so excited about curtailing the disease. But when you do the numbers, when you add up everything, you can see that, no, these guys are just full of garbage. And I say it, the intent may not be discoverable, but the evidence points to the intent. And here's how it goes. In January, when they started saying I was going to go to Nigeria. By the way, last year was supposed to be the fun year for my wife and I. I've been remarried for going on 24 years now. We have a wonderful marriage. So I said, honey, I'm going to go to Nigeria at the end of February, go have some fun with my friends, lay the grounds. If I see a property I can buy, I'll buy. But around April, May, you and I are going to go back to Nigeria, and then we'll travel some parts of the world that we've never been to. That was the deal. So when that COVID hit and I'm in the ER, I canceled my flight. I didn't even book it. I told my wife, I said, no way. There's something going on with what's happening in China. And the Chinese people are not going to say everything that's going on. So I'm just going to cancel. Come February, on January 14, the WHO said there's nothing to worry about. 10 days later, Fauci said there's nothing to worry about. And I said, I don't really buy that, because if I bought it, I would have gone to Nigeria. I said, there's something not right about that thing. People were dying. So in February, then I started doing a lot of research, started looking for papers on SARS, the original SARS-1 that happened several years earlier. So 2003, 2005, started looking at papers even way beyond then, 1990s, how to treat whatever this disease is. And you know what? The formula was simple. There are so many things that can be used to treat COVID. This COVID that we have, there's so many things that can be used to treat and stop it right in its tracks. And so I was waiting, like every other American physician, for the Center for Disease Control to come up with some of the things that I was already discovering. And I go to the website, CDC, and they'll say, well, they'll have a blank page where they say treatment protocols. And now, as it was creeping into the US, you hear Fauci saying, well, we don't need to worry about this. And I actually exposed him in one of my books, a book called The Hydroxychloroquine Debate, this book. So, fast forward, March, still nothing from the CDC, blank page. April, blank page. May, blank page. But here, by that time, I had read probably over 400, 300 journals looking at COVID. And I said, what is going on here? Oh, I get it. These people don't want any of the doctors here in the US to know how to treat this disease. Think about this. If this many people are dying, then all the CDC has to do is say, we don't have any specific treatment, but you doctors in the US consider using the following and try and see if that will work for your patients in the meantime, while we're trying to figure out how to treat this disease. Fast forward, in December, they approved a vaccine. And then it became clear to a lot of people that the reason the CDC, the NIH, the FDA were in collusion was because they had a vaccine in mind that they wanted to give people. And from that vaccine idea, by the way, they blocked every opportunity for doctors to treat COVID with the simple little tools that were available already. Now, this might surprise you. You know, there's a drug over the counter. Actually, I'm going to give you two new drugs. They're not new, two new methods. One is Pepcid. It's called famotidine. It's used for, reflux. If you have a little mild ulcer, it's used. And there's another one called Zyrtec, which is an antihistamine, which is good for allergies. Those two drugs have been shown to reduce deaths and risk of hospitalization if a patient has COVID and he takes those two. Can you imagine? So we have all manner, we know the pathology, we know the science, but the government basically in the US, and I've done videos on it, I've exposed it, they did an atrocity that is of international crime level to the American people. Why? I wasn't at the table when they decided why they were going to do it, so I'm not going to make speculations. But when you see the number of different things, hydroxychloroquine is one of them. And this particular book I wrote when I saw that they did a survey in about 26 countries of 6,277 doctors who said hydroxychloroquine works for our patients. And then we noticed that they were doing research and lying in the research papers. So Mike, it's like I send you a note, I write you a letter, I do a research, and so in the research paper, there's a little box on the first page that says, hey, Mike, I'm sorry, hydroxychloroquine doesn't work. It's always in virtually every journal paper that a doctor writes or a group of scientists write, they'll have a small box or the first big paragraph, separate section called the abstract. In that abstract, they will say the conclusion. So in the conclusion of those in the abstract section, where they make a little conclusion. So if you're interested in reading the entire paper, you can then read the entire paper, right? Mm-hmm. But if you're in a hurry, you just want to know, hey, so what this paper is saying, is hydroxychloroquine working? They'll say, well, in our study, hydroxychloroquine doesn't work. So, but when you go down and read the entire paper, which they know, and you could see that this was intentional, how can a group of scientists that we trust write a paper, 7, 10 page, 6-page paper, and in the discussion, they say, well, in our study, we know that it doesn't help us understand whether or not this drug is effective or not, because most times it is, okay? But we in our study did not find that it works, but we're not saying that it doesn't work. We're just saying, I'm telling you, there's a study called the Bulaware study. There's several of them. So what the book is about is that I took, and no one has ever done that in the history of medical sciences. I took each of those major studies from the Brazilian study. There's another one done in the UK study called the recovery study. And by the way, the recovery study was one of the most atrocious ones. They were actually given lethal doses of hydroxychloroquine. If you check out the doses, one of my professors of medicine, I did a virtual event for them last year. He was shocked because he's an attorney and he's a professor of medicine in the UK. He said, oh my goodness, I didn't even see that. Wow. He bought the book during the virtual event and he was the chairman of the event. So he was telling people, said, I just bought Caxton's book. It's just 189 pages and I'm reading as this Zoom event is going on. You better go and get it. He said he could not believe it. They were given 4 times the dose. So invariably, the patients will die. So hydroxychloroquine was set up to make it look like it was ineffective, all because this guy had a vaccine in mind. Now we have another drug, ivermectin. So I think Britain said it caught on and is allowing ivermectin to be used, but I don't know where that story is right now, besides the lockdown. So by the time ivermectin studies started coming out, these guys had spent so much of their energy on hydroxychloroquine that they couldn't put the same energy again because it will become obvious that these guys are just attacking any useful drug, okay? Yeah. So, but by that time, they had their vaccine on its way. So they were just talking about their vaccine. Now, Mike, think about this vaccine for a second. This vaccine, unlike the regular vaccines, regular vaccine like the mumps, measles, rubella, smallpox, even influenza, once you get that vaccine, the vaccine you'll develop antibodies. Those antibodies will protect you. But the second thing that people may not be aware of is that a vaccine has not just that direct effect of protecting you, from getting sick, it will also protect the people around you from getting infected by you. You see it? So if you get measles and you're vaccinated, you activate antibodies in your lymphoid tissues, your lymph glands, your lymph nodes. They will attack the virus. The virus will not be spread to others anymore, and you too will be protected. So it's called the indirect effect of the vaccine. Now, if I take hydroxychloroquine, and I take it early, let's say stage 1, I divide it into 3 different approaches to dividing COVID-19 infection so that people can see what they need to do to arrest the disease. In one of those stages, I use oxygen levels. In another, I use the regular infectious disease approach, stage 1, 2, 3, 4. But in another one, based on pathology, how sick people are and when they die, I use 6 different classifications, all in all, to accomplish one thing, that every doctor in the US particularly, because it seems like doctors elsewhere have caught on, in the third world countries who cannot afford all these vaccines and all this research, okay? And they were using those methods, they were getting fantastic results. So picture this. Outside the US, people are getting fantastic results with hydroxychloroquine, but in the US, hydroxychloroquine doesn't work, really, okay? But there was a reason. They were prescribing it for patients at stage 3 and 4 instead of stage 1. Hydroxychloroquine is not it's not a magic pill, okay? You got to give it at the right time to the right person, and if you don't give it at the right time, you lose. So the government of the US, the FDA, made a rule, and it wasn't an oversight. The rule they made was that hydroxychloroquine should only be given to patients in stage 3 or 4 when it will no longer be effective. And you don't have to be a brilliant scientist to know that that is so wrong. But the question is why? And that's why I got on the scene. I was so mad in April that I wrote the first book. Amazon blocked the book.
Yeah.
Can you believe that? They blocked my book, that first book. So I put that book on my website, free for people. So I wrote the second book. All that time, the CDC, their website, had nothing on how to treat the disease. Now, if you read my book, this is the book I wrote in April of last year. If you read that book called COVID-19 Physician Treatment Strategies, it's on iTunes, barnesandnobles.com, and all the retailers online. You will say, oh my goodness, definitely these people did not want the American people to know what's going on and how this disease functions or how to treat it. And you can see the effects on the number of people that have died. Unfortunately, we have this herd mentality amongst the majority of doctors in the US. So there are very few doctors that were bold enough. The reason is when you have enough knowledge, you're going to be bold. Someone actually accused me once because he was totally ignorant and said, your license may be at stake. I said, on what basis will my license be at stake? I work in the emergency room. Trust me, I see 65, 70 something year old men coming with COVID, say, I lost my taste, but I'm very strong, I'm okay. And I said, look, I'm going to start you on hydroxychloroquine. It works. You just have to be started early. And I'm glad you're here. I've given it to 19-year-olds, I've given it 77-year-olds, and 100% results. But, when they publish those things in the news, or in the journals, intentionally, think about this. The drug companies and even the NIH, and in the NIH we have Fauci, okay? Fauci is part of Moderna, the ones who made the other vaccine, the second vaccine that's been used, the mRNA vaccine. He has a patent with them and they're together and he makes policies on healthcare. So they blocked everything. They even said, don't use hydroxychloroquine in prophylaxis, don't use it in post-exposure or pre-exposure. Don't use it in early treatment. Where is that done on any planet? Where people are dying, you don't have a cure, and some doctors are saying this is working, and you're not saying, well, if it works, use it. But be careful because it has XYZ side effects. That's what they will say. They didn't say that. They said, do not use. Where on any planet does that happen? Where you have a disease on one side, you have a pill on the other side that, let's say it's even a placebo effect, right? Let's say the drug doesn't work. It's just the mind of the people, and the placebo effect is so strong, it's leading to cures. What's the alternative? If you don't give the drug, people die, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But
So
then,
there's no harm, is there? So even if it was just a placebo effect, you might as well go with it.
yes, but they're saying we're going to make all these rules so that you cannot even prescribe something that may work. We know it works. So my patients were getting better. We don't even admit my patients from the emergency room. We give them the hydroxychloroquine, say, come back in 24 hours. Let's take a look at you. They don't come back. They're not dead. They live in a small city. Look, this thing works so well that at one point in one of the emergency rooms that I work in a lot of emergency rooms in Louisiana. This small city, I actually don't want to call it a city, a small town in Louisiana. The coroner in that city is also a medical doctor. The coroner started writing hydroxychloroquine for the people in the city. And the emergency room started seeing fewer patients. We used to see about 3 or 4 a day. The last time I went there, I saw one patient. I was there for 48 hours. I saw one patient and I said, guys, this is only my first patient. What's going on? They said, oh, this is the first patient we've seen in 3 weeks. So but we didn't understand what was going on. I was just saying, these guys don't want doctors to know how to treat this disease. What I didn't have, the missing piece in the puzzle, was that it's because of the vaccine that they want to sell to the rest of the world. Making sense?
Yeah,
And I said,
it is. Money's always behind everything, isn't it? Really, there's always the monetary decisions are always behind everything, rather than the good of the people or whatever,
yes.
So yeah, but as a doctor, then obviously, like they talk about all these numbers and stuff, right? But I haven't seen that many people affected myself. The only people I seem to know who've had people affected have been people with older parents, So like, they go on about all these numbers and everything. Have you seen a real big like influx of people in that? Because I have. But obviously, I'm not working in the HR, but I haven't heard a lot about it. It seems to be like they fudge the numbers, and the numbers aren't accurate, and they add stuff in that's not relevant. Somebody dies, and they might have had COVID, but they also might have had something else that was going to take them anyway. And it's just all these like fake numbers. It seems to me, and all this like hyper sensitive calculations, and they just it just seems to be, I don't know, a bit of a overreaction is the way I see it. It seems to be a bigger reaction than it is, Yeah.
So, but around July, when the surge hit the US, I mean, people really died.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I brought up in the podcast, and some guys invited me to do podcast interviews with them, and I exposed a lot more detail. And this is, they can collapse that information out of the internet. But in January, I forgot to say this. When I saw the way the disease was spreading, one of the things I told my wife is, this is not a natural illness. Think about this. Yes, there's this Wuhan market where they're selling all these exotic animals and stuff like that. But if this is a natural disease, guess what? It will spread naturally. It will have its spike and it will come down. Okay, that can happen. But if you have a spike that's sustained, it's a mutation and it could be a genetically engineered virus. So let's not argue. And some people were saying that's a conspiracy theory, that how can you say the virus was engineered? But whoever says that and wears a lab coat and says, I'm a scientist, if you ever, Mike, and if any of your listeners or viewers ever see a doctor or a scientist denying the possibility that this could come from a genetically engineered virus, then they are part of the problem. They are the conspiracy engineers themselves. Why do I say that? As far back as in 2002, the polio virus, it's a naturally occurring virus. But in 2002, scientists having so much knowledge of genetic engineering were able to create the polio virus from scratch. Genetically engineered from scratch without anything else. And it's quite common, even this coronavirus vaccines, when someone was trying to do the vaccine in 2014, 2015, and it failed, what it did was it took the back, the virus is two main things, a shell and genetic material. So there's something called a Zika virus. So this scientist or group of scientists took the shell of the Zika virus and the DNA material from the coronavirus and tried to create a vaccine with it. And the ferrets died. The animals that they were trying to inject with the vaccine they created, the vaccine didn't protect them. So that was where it was abandoned. So all of a sudden, we just hear in 2020 that there is a vaccine and it works, right? And when you look at the numbers, I looked at the actual numbers. I looked at the clinical trials. I looked at the details. And one of the things I'll tell you, I don't know about Canada. I don't even know about the UK. But the majority of physicians are statistical illiterates and financial illiterates. The majority of us, that includes myself, okay? I just took extra liking because I love mathematics to understand statistics a little further down the road than the average doctor. But the majority of us, you could say 95% or more, are statistical illiterates. What does that mean? Okay. If you give a band-aid to a little kid and someone has a cut and it's a small cut, a 5-year-old can say, "Uncle, let me help you put that on your finger," right? That doesn't mean that that little kid understands how to suture a wound, right? He just seen mommy put a band-aid on a little girl before, and he can do that. So what we have as doctors is that little knowledge of the little 5-year-old putting a band-aid on a wound. That's all we know as far as statistics is concerned. Anybody who is a skills statistician or epidemiologist or clinical epidemiologist can run circles around a doctor, because with the same research, they can use certain operations, even though they may be wrong, and make us think that a drug X is better than drug Y, when in fact, there's no difference. And they can give you a research paper and tell you to interpret the paper or an abstract sentence and say, "What do you think about that sentence?" And you say, "Well, it's obvious that drug X is far better than drug Y." And then when they pull the rest of the numbers in there, they'll say, "You're wrong," and they can show you how. So clinical epidemiologists, statisticians are basically number magicians that the drug companies employ to make a bad number look neutral and a neutral number look fantastic. Why do I say that? It's the norm. And that's what's written in the hydroxychloroquine debate. You can see the numbers, that they are falsified numbers. The conclusions are falsified. So let's use a research paper like the Bullaware study. That was a study done in Montreal, Canada, and Minnesota to try and show that hydroxychloroquine is ineffective. Now let's start with this. You don't do studies to try and show that a drug is ineffective. But when you pretend like your goal is to show that it's effective and the things you say at the beginning show that you really don't want this drug to succeed, right? It's pretty obvious in the language, but that is a language that most doctors are not even aware of. So you expose people to COVID and then you treat them and you want to see whether the hydroxychloroquine prevents them from getting COVID, right? But if you wait 3-4 days down the road instead of giving them immediately, it's no longer prophylaxis. The thing is already in the system. So basically, your research is no longer prophylaxis, but early treatment. And if you're a scientist at that caliber, you are capable of thinking. No one holds you responsible for properly labeling your research study when you want to publish it, correct? As long as you have the data. But you cannot mislead people to thinking that a drug is ineffective when in fact it is. So when some other clinicians or professors of epidemiology who are smarter than us pick up that research paper, read it. They say, come on, this is absolute nonsense. This drug works. And that they can fool me as a doctor because I'm a statistical illiterate.
Yeah.
Remember, the paper was written for practicing doctors, not for professors of epidemiology, right?
Yeah.
So the professor of epidemiology now writes a letter to the editor and said, that's absolute BS. That drug works. Yeah. Oh, well, no one listens to the quote.
It's not what the stats say.
But CNN
politicians can make the same numbers mean two different things, depending on which party you're on.
So, but when lives are at stake and doctors sign up for life, then they begin to sense that these things they're putting in these journals are lies, then they start prescribing the drug. And then the government says, do not give it to those people. The people that need it, 80% of people that actually get COVID don't ever get hospitalized. They have mild symptoms. And if you give it to that 80%, give the hydroxychloroquine to that 80%, guess what? It will prevent the spread of the disease. But then they start giving it only to the 5% or 10% to 15% of those who get hospitalized, who by the time they get hospitalized, it's basically too late.
It's too late, yeah.
So if you wanted to prevent the pandemic, you will have given the hydroxychloroquine to the 80%,
yeah.
So they don't spread it, but they didn't do that. Now, taxpayer money goes to those people and those organizations, billions of dollars. And one guy and a few other like myself who have read the entire journals saw the lies and said, this is wrong. And we're treating patients and realized the patients were getting better. And so the government is now using threats to say, no, you cannot write it. You should not give it. But they don't have a right to tell us how to practice. Most doctors didn't realize that. But if you didn't know how to interpret the journals, because Mike, picture this. One of the doctors that interviewed me, he's been a psychiatrist, an emergency room doctor, and he deals with addiction. He has a podcast, been going on for 20 years. And he kind of interviewed me and he was shocked. And then I sent him a copy of my book and he called me and he said, until he heard me say those things, he never knew anything about cytokines. I said, cytokines are the hangman of COVID-19. And if you can block cytokines, you can stop this disease dead in its tracks. Guess what? I said that in April and March of last year. And I published two books. On April 7, I published the first book saying that any layperson on the streets can take ginger, garlic, because the drug company sponsored the research to show that these things have antiviral and anti-inflammatory, antibacterial effects, and they're natural. Mike, up until last year, I thought when patients tell me, oh, doc, that bronchitis, I didn't want to take any antibiotics. I just took some lemon, some garlic. I look at them as they're schizophrenic. I look at them as they're semi-psychotic. What are you talking about? You have a bronchitis, you're coughing up, purulent sputum, yellowish, and you're having a fever and you're telling me you're eating garlic? Are you out of your mind? That was Caxton, because I'm board certified in internal medicine. You cannot tell me that you took some garlic, some ginger, and every one of us as doctors used to think that was insane until COVID came along. So even though they're trying to create fear in people, let me tell you this, because of COVID, the world is healthier today. A lot of people that ignored their zinc and their vitamin C, vitamin D, many more are now taking those things, and those things prevent you from getting sick. Here's the catch. Zinc is an antiviral agent. It inhibits pox virus, so many respiratory viruses. So not only that, hydroxychloroquine has been shown to be very effective in reducing the effects of chemotherapy. And it helps kill cancer cells. It's amazing that in the studies that are actually quoted in the book, resistant breast cancer. Now hear this, Mike, this is insane. Resistant brain cancer, resistant lung cancer, resistant prostate cancer, all those responded to chemotherapy when they thought the patients were going to die when they give them some hydroxychloroquine. And in fact, in some of those studies, when they gave them hydroxychloroquine, and I'm going to share something with you about this, when they added hydroxychloroquine, some patients needed only 10% of the usual dose of cancer agent to get better. 10%. So you can see that hydroxychloroquine,
cost saving in that,
if
isn't
it's
it? Big saving. A big saving.
So
if they were to use it, it'd be a big saving. So there's some companies out there wouldn't want to see that.
yes. So here we have zinc. Two of the things that plague the human race that we're most worried about are viruses, right? And cancer. Now, if you do the math, just do a little math. Hydroxychloroquine inhibits, or rather, cancer cells cannot proliferate with hydroxychloroquine. Viruses cannot function with zinc. So you now have a situation where hydroxychloroquine and zinc could collapse the cancer industry. And that's over several billions of dollars or trillions of dollars a year in the cancer industry. Yeah. So you think the drug companies want that to ever happen?
Big pharma, yeah. Well, so I've always got a big issue about, like, like big companies buying patents off like inventions to stop the like tire companies have done it. There's tires that won't wear down, but they buy the patent, like companies like Goodyear or whatever, because they want to keep selling you the consumables, because their business model is selling you the stuff that wears down, not the stuff that don't wear down. So they buy the patents off the companies, and the drug companies do the same thing. Better drugs come along and they hide them and whatever, because they want to keep selling the big business drugs rather than the very little business drugs that don't make them no money. So, but also as well, something I think I've heard somewhere as well is the overall deaths, because you said the country's been made healthier, if you like, because of all the protection, all the other viruses, and everything stopped spreading as well. So I've been told, I don't know if this is right or not, I wanted your perspective on it, that the actual overall deaths as a human race has gone down since COVID because of all the other stuff that's been saved. Is that not right or not?
I can't say for sure, because you and I don't have numbers, right?
No.
And the people that count,
yeah,
if their job is to count, right? And we have this follow the leader kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
So if you go to the CDC and the CDC says there are more deaths, even if there were fewer deaths, one of the things I try to stay away from, Mike, to be honest with you, because I know the FBI, CIA, they all listen to my stuff. They know they're trying to track and all this stuff. One of the things I will say is, if I cannot verify it, then I'll just say my own opinion. Yeah. And I don't like a lot of opinions, okay? But you can see when you connect the dots where they're leading to. So if the CDC says, oh, there are more deaths, even though they know there are fewer deaths, right? How are you going to know? You can't, because they were part of the problem in the first place. If they had told doctors what to do while they're trying to figure out treatments or vaccines and treatments, we wouldn't have this problem. They didn't. So I can't really say I trust them with any numbers. And they are the ones that give the numbers out, by the way. So
I know lots of people who've had, I know lots of people who've had like sick patients and stuff, and they've said something's been ticked down to COVID, and it wasn't. I've actually heard physical testimonies of that, like, of people I trust, like, So I just think, and I'm sure I've seen the reports of it, with the amount of deaths that we've had through COVID is similar to a normal bad flu year.
It is. It's just that the morbidly obese people are more likely to die. And by the way, there's this thing about Black people being infected and all that stuff. Yeah. I don't know. I've worked in at least 4 or 5 different COVID hospitals during this whole COVID, plus the other emergency rooms and hospitals that I work. And I've only seen one Black person, okay, only one. Yeah. And he walked out of the hospital on the 3rd day, okay, in South Texas, near the border. So yes, well, we do have a lot, but I think they know that the problem is Blacks don't trust the healthcare system, particularly with vaccinations. Yeah. And they knew they were coming up with a vaccine, and so they created another scare, possibly.
Market, another demand.
So that Blacks who say, we got to get the vaccine, we got to get the vaccine. But one of the things I shared in this last year is that when you look at this COVID, it's like Tuskegee, you know, this syphilis experiment where they were injecting, they didn't let the men get treated for syphilis, and they were deceiving them, even blocking them from getting treated for the illness. And I said the only difference is that Tuskegee was against blacks. They wanted to kill those black men and do dissections on their cadavers. 30 of them escaped. And funny enough, one of those 30 men that escaped today is my sister-in-law. So, you know, you never know what the connections can be. But that's not what's driving me to do this. The whole fact that I signed up to save lives, and you saw at 13 years old why I signed up to save lives.
Yeah.
And I had to put cameras in my house because one lawyer told me, he said that these guys are so wicked, they might come to my house. And by the way, when I released the first book, which Amazon blocked, and they thought that was going to be it, when I checked the website, because I've written several books that are published on Amazon, I didn't expect them to do that anyway. I had to call them and say, I'm not a taxi cab driver in New York whose grandmother had COVID and I'm trying to make 15 minutes of fame. I'm a doctor. I've been a doctor for more than 30 years. And what I'm writing in the book is going to save lives. Don't you understand that we have something horrible coming to the US? This was in April.
Yeah.
And they blocked the book. And the guy I spoke to says, oh, no, I didn't block the book. Let me check. Let me get with the reviewers. I said, didn't you read the book? He said, no, I didn't read the book. I'm not a reviewer. So I'll get back with you. I don't know why they did that. I'm sorry. So he called me back the next day and he said, his countenance had changed completely. But when he said he's going to call me back, I went on the website to look for other COVID books to see if anyone wrote any book on COVID.
Yeah.
The only book that was there on COVID, on at least how to treat it, was written by the Communist Chinese Party. It was a 35 or 34 page book by CCP, How to Treat COVID. Now, how would you think of this, Mike? Amazon.com blocks a book written by an American citizen that's showing Americans how they can treat the disease on April 7. And that author, knowing his block, scans to see why they're blocking the books and sees a Chinese book, a book written by the Chinese government, not by a Chinese citizen, by the Chinese government, CCP. And it says, this is how you treat it. And Amazon is carrying that book, but refuses to publish in fact, I think about 3 or 4 months ago, just to tease them, I sent them an email saying, guys, it's time you unlock, at least now we have other books out, it's time for you to unblock that book. But they feel that they've got so much power over you, they will let that book stay blocked. And there's more to this. So there's actually more. Yeah. You know, in the UK, you know, this institute called the Purbright Institute, and I need to drop this gem for your viewers so they know the atrocity or the possibility that there's a great atrocity going on. The one I told you was in April, where those doctors were giving 4 times the dose to patients with COVID. I mean, you have patients who are so sick, their lungs are shutting down, their liver is shutting down, their kidneys are shutting down, and you were giving them 4 times the dose. You know they're gonna die, and they did die. Yeah. And it was horrible. It's a crime on humanity. But I want to point on another issue here. In November of 2019, that's when we realized that the virus must have been spreading really fast, right? Yeah. And in November, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave, believe it or not, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gave the Purbright Institute $5.5 million. Now, I'm thinking, okay, but let me tell you a little bit about the Purbright Institute that I know. Yeah. When in January of last year, I saw the way the disease was spreading and the silence of the Chinese government, and I didn't know where this was headed. I had to cancel my flight. I decided to say, you know what, let me research something. Maybe I can find something about this virus that nobody's thinking of. So I searched coronavirus genetic engineering. I didn't find anything. So I typed in on Google coronavirus patent. Guess what? The lawyer that filed the patent, his website came up. I said, what? So I clicked on it and I saw, I was saying, oh my goodness, the lawyer, if you're a lawyer, you file for patent for a virus, you want other people to know that, you've got game as a lawyer. You can, if you have a virus, you patent it, I can help you with it. That's money for him, right?
Yeah.
So his name came up and I went through. So the Pub Rights Institute had filed for a coronavirus patent. By the way, they actually filed for 3 coronavirus patents. One of those coronavirus patents was filed in, I think, July of 2010. Yes, July of 2010. And it was for a coronavirus with a spike protein, S protein, which is what we have that is used to make the vaccine. They filed a patent for a coronavirus patent that makes the virus more deadly than the naturally occurring virus. And on September 2014, they got the patent. Now, very interesting dates. The July 10, it wasn't that interesting as the September 2014 date. Why do I say that?
Because that's
in between
on.
The US government, I actually put that picture of the paper. It was a 3-page document by the US government. Maybe you didn't know this. A lot of people may not. I didn't know this either until I started researching. The US government paid or pays 220 labs around the world money and give them grants. It's probably run to hundreds of millions. Who knows? Of course, they got to give you some money, right? If you're 220 labs. And they told them to develop a virus, not a vaccine, a virus, 220 labs, a virus that is deadlier from the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, the SARS-CoV-1, and the influenza. They wanted them to develop a respiratory virus that is deadlier than the naturally occurring ones. And in October 2014, so the Pub Rights Institute got their patent, right, in September. In October, the US government then sends a letter to all the 220 labs saying they should stop their research. What does that mean? That means they got what they wanted, right? They call it gain of function. I have the document. It's on the internet. So the governments in October of the US government sends a letter to all those places and say, hey guys, stop doing the research. We now have gain of function, which means we now have the virus we're looking for.
We don't need it anymore.
Exactly. So if you have any money, we're not going to give you any more money. If you have any money, either I don't know whether you return the money or you use it for other research, but freeze and stop doing anything you're doing. Okay, fast forward. Bill and Melinda Gates gave the same Pub Rights Institute $186,000 as a grant 1 year. A couple of years later, they gave him another grant for $386,000 somewhere, $380-something thousand as another grant. But nothing near $500,000. All of a sudden, in November, when the disease had started spreading, the Pub Rights Institute gets $5.5 million. And I went to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the Pub Rights Institute, and I looked at the information, trying to make sense of why that sudden money. If you watch enough mafia movies, you'll know that looks like a payoff. Like a hitman gets paid. So when I then said, maybe it's just another grant, right? But to me, it wasn't just another grant. It looked like a payoff. It smells funny. And I don't want anybody thinking conspiracy, but just look at the objective findings. So I now went to look at the reason for the grant. And I was insulted as a human being. You know why? The emphasis for the grant was they wanted to advance animal and human health. What does that mean? For the advancement of animal and human health? Are you saying that humans and animals are equal? And then when I read the statement by another professor on respect to the grant, you could see that even in his tone, in the language he used, it was all about the animals, not about humans. So you have a patent. You now have this guy called Bill Gates giving that kind of money. And it's bad enough that people cannot connect the dots when people start dying of a disease and the US government is discouraging or putting fear in doctors who could prescribe a drug that may work, right?
Mhm.
And they're making it look like whoever says the hydroxychloroquine works is an idiot, but they know fully well that it works because they got to know more than I know. I mean, that's why the taxpayers pay them money. So if I know it works, obviously they know it works.
Yeah.
That's what brought me to this COVID point. And I think I've done enough. If people followed my advice, and people are following my advice in other parts of the world, and I have other people who are experts, far more brilliant people than I am, whose countries, they're foreigners, their countries listen to them. And one of them is a guy who I met. His Minister of Health got sick with COVID. I want to put his name, anonymous, but the Minister of Health's sister sent him a text because the government officials didn't want anybody to know. And he treated this Minister of Health over the phone. And you could see the text, I'm getting so much better from money. One of the regimens that he gave the lady was not just hydroxychloroquine, but the Pepcid, famotidine, and Zyrtec, cetirizine, And another friend of mine, a neurosurgeon, called me this morning and said, I think I'm sick with this thing. And I told him to take the same regimen. So there's so many things, Mike, so many things that work.
Yeah,
That's
also, the Russians have got a vaccine, and I haven't really heard much about that. But they're obviously always developing viruses and poisons and all that sort of stuff. And they seem to have had a vaccine as well. And I've spoken to a few Russians, and I say, like, have you got a vaccine? They said, yeah. And I said, is it even rolled out? They're like, yeah. I'm like, that doesn't seem. I haven't heard anything about that on the news or anything like that. But to me, it's like as if everyone's got the vaccine. You know what I mean? It's like as if everyone was just sat there waiting for the vaccine. So like as if they've all been developing the virus at some point, or similar versions of the virus.
But you see, the thing is, let's look at the media. One of the podcast interviews, I have a podcast that I run with Neil Haley, and one of the things I did was I did one episode on medical journalist terrorism. Most of these journalists have been bought. The stations, the executives are, bought over. So they'll do whatever, and they won't cover the Russian field if the vaccine is far more effective than what they have here. And there's so many lies about the mathematics of the vaccine effectiveness. So, Mike, one of the things you can see with vaccines, I like to use a casino, because most people dream of going to a casino to play, even if it's just with $10. Most people don't have time. And a lot of gamblers do go there. It can be a fun place. But I want to use a casino to explain to you those vaccines. Okay. So let's say you're in the UK and I am in US, and we say, Mike, we've been working so hard, let's take a break. So we go to Las Vegas, right? Mm-hmm. But we booked our hotels. For some reason, we go with our families, we book different hotels. We thought we were going to be in the same hotel. It turns out the names were similar, but different places. But the casinos now have what's called a safety rule. Mm-hmm. That safety rule is whenever you arrive at the casino, you tell them how much money you're bringing, and they want to make sure you don't spend more than 5% of whatever you brought with you. You can go eat with it, spend it on food and all this stuff, but you're not going to spend more than 5% of what you came with to gamble. Okay, it's called the safety rule. So we establish a safety rule, 5%. So let's say you go with $10,000. I use a ridiculous number. Most people don't do that, but $10,000. So the maximum you're going to lose out of that $10,000 is $500, right? Mm-hmm. So the first day, we unpack our bags, we go to bed, wake up in the morning and say, Mike, I'm going to be in the casino. And he said, yeah, I'm going to be in the casino. Let's meet. And we thought we were in the same. That's how we realized that we're not in the same hotel. So I said, Caxton, I've been waiting for you for the past 2 hours. What's going on? Yeah, I'm in the casino. Well, I'm in the casino too. I'm waiting for you for the past 2 hours. And then we realized we're in two different hotels, right? Mm-hmm. But then as the time goes on, you're in the casino, you lost $10, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm stingy, so I'm putting in dimes. So I lose $1.
Mhm.
The question is, after those 2 hours, we're eating, we're looking around. I lost $1, you lost $10 in 2 hours. Does that mean that my casino is safer than your casino? Because in 2 hours, I lost $1, and in 2 hours, you lost $10? Absolutely not. But what the drug companies are doing basically is to say, oh, Mike, how much did you lose? $10. Dr. Caxton, how much did you lose? $1. Okay, let's get an interview. Let's do a press conference. Well, Mike, can you tell the world how much you lost in the casino? $10. Well, Dr. Caxton, how much did you lose in that casino? $1. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you can see that Dr. Caxton's hotel is 10 times safer than Mike's hotel. That's fraudulent, right? Because you've not lost $500. Until you get to $500 or more, your casinos are just as safe one as the other. That's what clinical trials is. You establish a rule before you start, and you don't go twisting numbers to suit what you want to say. This is what they did with the Pfizer vaccine. And if your listeners go to Dr. Caxton on YouTube, they'll find these videos. I broke down those numbers in such a way that anybody can see it. The absolute difference between your $10 that you lost and my $1 that I lost is less than 1%. It's actually less than 0.1%. Yeah. But then I can make 0.1% look like 10 times over. Yeah. That's what they've done with the vaccines. So I don't believe, so even the new vaccine that came out, AstraZeneca, okay, if you look at the numbers, I just decided today I was going to look at those numbers, and I saw that they were lower. But you know that those low numbers don't mean a thing. They may actually be, in the real world sense, be more effective than the one that's 94%, because even the 94% number is a manufactured number, not a real number, what you call relative. So just like relative to my hotel, your hotel may be 10 times less safe, but the absolute difference is irrelevant. Am I making sense? Yeah. That's what the vaccine numbers are about, at least for the Moderna vaccine and the Pfizer vaccine. So if people want to take it, they need to know that in the Pfizer vaccine group, those who got the placebo, 99.25% of them in the placebo group, and I want to say that again for emphasis, in the placebo group. I want to say it so slowly so people can catch it. Yeah. 99.25% of those who did not get the vaccine but got the placebo did not get sick with COVID in the Pfizer study. That number for the Moderna vaccine, because Moderna is Fauci and the NIH, they will push their numbers because they are the government, they can push their numbers a little bit to look better. The number of people in the placebo group with the Moderna vaccine that did not get sick was 98 point something, 99.2 in the Pfizer vaccine. As a matter of fact, the Moderna people can say, well, our vaccine is far better than the Pfizer vaccine, 6 to 8 or 10 times. The same casino rule applies. It's nothing. It's no big deal. So anyone can take the vaccine if they feel comfortable that it will protect them, but they should remember that it will still not protect their families from them if they get the infection in their nose or they're coughing it up, and it just won't make them sick. They can still make other people sick. Yeah. And that's where I rest the case on COVID. So you still want to share something else, Mike? I'm game. I have a few more minutes. I got to take a little brief nap before I go.
I think we covered everything there. I think the best thing to do is like leave people with where they can go to, like I say, research some of this or listen to get your book or go to the YouTube and that sort of thing. And we can direct those people there, and they can do some more research in their own time. Now you're giving everyone lots of food for thought, and they can go and research a bit more elsewhere then. So where's the best places to send them?
Sure. Amazon.com has several of my books, but the hydroxychloroquine debate is a really good eye opener because you can see how people can plot, not from a conspiracy theory perspective. I don't care about that. I use objective findings. You can see all that stuff there. That's an a Kindle version and a paperback for the hydroxychloroquine debate. It exposes all the fraud. You look at the research, you can see all the research. I broke it down, it's paper by paper. Now, the other book that shows you everything about the disease that you really need to know, that's a fantastic book for a lot of doctors around the world, is on iTunes, and it's called COVID-19 Physician Treatment Strategies. But I have a bonus for your listeners. If they go to my website, DOCTOR, Caxton, drcaxton.com, as soon as they get to the website, once they scroll down, start scrolling down, a box will come up. You see that book that I said Amazon blocked? That book is free. It's going to be free until April 7th. When it's exactly 1 year, I'm going to pull it from my website and put it on another website where it will be sold. So right now it's free. And I said, you know what, since they want to kill so many people, it appears that way, I'm going to make that book absolutely free. So when you click and put your email address, and when you type in your email address and send it, it will send the PDF of the book, COVID-19 Remedies. The cover looks like the one on the iTunes, which is for physicians, but it's a different book entirely. So it's COVID-19 Remedies. It's free on drcaxton.com. Just scroll down once you get there, put in your email and send the PDF to your email address that you put in.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a great offer. And like you said earlier as well, if they look for Dr. Caxton on YouTube, there's some YouTube videos out there as well.
Yes, I have at least 19 teaching videos exactly for COVID that will open people's eyes so they understand what's going on and can protect themselves. Unfortunately, they've got to protect themselves. Because it seems like
what's the best place they can go to, or best book that you would recommend out of the ones you've written for the divorce side of things?
Well, I have 25 things every pastor must like about divorce. That's where, if you're a Christian or have Christian inclinations, and if you're a pastor, that's a good book. There's a book called Divorce Medicine. That's where I share in details the medical complications of divorce, and that's in on Amazon.com also. And if you want to really know how to build a marriage, and you want to pick up the tiny little pieces that may be on the ground in your marriage, I'll say get 5 love handles. 5 love handles, 25 things every pastor must like about divorce, and Divorce Medicine. Those are 3 critical books for the subject of relationships that I deal with. I have other books that you might be interested in, but I think for a divorce and marriage, those are the key ones that will be very immediately helpful with a lot of practical information. I also have a book on female sexual arousal, because sex is a big thing in relationships. And if you're having problems in that area, I suggest you get that book, Female Sexual Arousal and the Pink Pill. Those books are all on Amazon.com.
Yeah, brilliant. So there's lots there for everybody to get stuck into, I suppose. So yeah, and obviously they can catch you on the podcast as well. How many episodes do you record per month or per week or whatever? And how do they go and find that?
All right, I have, I think, about 10 episodes. The reason is COVID is a limited thing for me. And I've actually said, I'm not going to do much of COVID anymore because it's just a bunch of baloney. We figured out what was done. We figured out what could have been done as far back as February, and so I have a limited number, except something really unusual comes up on COVID. Yeah. I'll probably do maybe 1 or 2 more additional episodes, but I have very comprehensive, detailed episodes. They're less than 45 minutes. Most of them are about 30 minutes. But they're very detailed, and you'll have a very clear and great understanding of COVID and where we really should be, or what should have been done and what can be done right now.
Yeah. Okay. And what's that podcast called? And is it podcast stations?
Spotify and Apple. It's Timeless Truths in Medicine and Marriage by Dr. Caxton. So if you type in my name just on Google, sometimes you can pull up, you'll see podcasts. So if you type in on Google Dr. Caxton podcast, he'll pull it up. But it's on Spotify and it's on the Apple podcast station. So
big stations, yeah, brilliant. So well, that's it then. So that's a lot of reading, a lot of listening to do. So and a bit of YouTube watching as well. And obviously you can listen to this episode on my podcast or on the YouTube channel too. So nothing else really left for me to say other than thank you very much for coming on the podcast and for sharing all of what you've been researching and learning in a lifetime of helping people and a year of heavy research on the COVID. And hopefully it'll all be sorted in a distant memory soon anyway. And we'll all get back to some sort of level of new normality, because things are never going to go back to normal. They're going to just go back to whatever the new situation is going forward.
Yes, Mike. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
No problem. It's been great, and have a good day. And you in work today now? Because was it?
I have another hour of trying to catch a nap here before I go to work. So
yeah, well, you catch a good nap. I'm going to go to bed soon because it's 10:30. So I was up at 5 o'clock this morning. So I've been going all day. So
I know you run 24 hours, so I can't do that.
no. But anyway, you're married as well. I'm divorced, so I'm all right. I've got nobody telling me to get off Clubhouse, whereas I'm sure you would have.
I know.
But have a great day, and I'll catch you on Clubhouse next time you're in.
You too.
All
Thanks,
right.
Mike.
All the best.
All right.
Bye.